to send a message out to the universe. This is the kind of band I want to play in. Just saying, I might be a little tired of playing country music. This would be right up my alley. So, universe, please take care of that for me. This is the Producer's Journal podcast. My name is Derek. Thanks for joining this show. If it's your first time here, this is a podcast where I share my experiences as a podcast producer. And it's very story form, and I come on here and riff. If you're looking for a top 3 list on how to do something, this is not the podcast for you. But if you're willing to listen to my stories about my experiences, then you may learn something from that, and I'd love for you to stick around. Go to my website, shelbyroweproductions.com. Join me on Instagram at Shelby Rowe Productions LLC. So today's featured topic is going to be more of a story. We're going to call it Get to Know Me. And I'm going to talk about my history in radio and how it connects me to the podcast world. But first, updates. I always like to give it a little update on the front end because it's real time. As I record this just today, I technically had my first client recording content in this studio. His name is Chris Camp. He owns a business called Motivate with Coach Camp. He's a motivational speaker, leader, and I met him because I had him on the Real Hernando podcast to help promote his business here locally, and we've built a great relationship, and I am using him as a guinea pig. He's a brand new business, looking for exposure and just trying to grow and network. I'm a 4-year-old business, technically, but locally, brand new. People know about me now because of the Real Hernando podcast, but I have a brick and mortar, if you will. This studio office is me going brick and mortar locally, and I've had this space for 2 months. So I'm a baby too, locally. So I'm helping him out, and by helping him out, he's helping me out. And I devised a way to create some content for him for his social media platforms, his YouTube channel, and we're starting a podcast for him. And I managed to figure out a way to do all of that that's going to cost me nothing but time. I'm not going to need to weigh on my team in order to get some of this stuff done. I devised it so it's just my time. Now, time is money. I understand that. But there's 2 things I'm getting from this. Exposure. He's letting me tag all of his descriptions on his socials, YouTube, the eventual podcast, that Shelby Rowe Productions is his podcast production and content management business. So it will say podcast produced and social media managed by Shelby Rowe Productions on everything. So that's great. And then he mentions me in his videos, which is good. And the real reason I'm doing this is it gives me an opportunity to exercise this idea I have on how to help local businesses with their content. Not traditional podcasts is going to be, or traditional podcast is not going to be for everybody here. Unless the guy that owns the local bakery wants to have a podcast, okay, great. But it's hard to pitch a podcast on its own, right? But if I can say, your social media platforms are pretty slow, you're not really pushing a lot out there, I can't promise you thousands of likes. I can't promise you that people are going to start walking through your door saying, I love your Facebook posts, but what I can promise you is you will get more exposure and bigger reach, period. Because if you go from posting once a month to once a week, your reach is going to go up. So let's think of what we can do. What can we create to have consistent posts on a higher frequency? So that's what I'm doing with Chris. We sat down today. I really pitched everything to him, and we had already planned for him to come in here and record in this very modest space I have right now. I'm really not ready to record any content in here, whether it's audio or video, but we still did it nonetheless. It just happened to hang lights yesterday as I record this. So I have lights hung up. I have cameras purchased, but they have not been mounted yet. Work in progress. But now that I have some lighting and a nice blue curtain as a makeshift backdrop, we recorded 4 5-minute videos for Chris today. And I'm really looking forward to chopping those up. And I'm not going to bury you in the weeds on my plan on how I'm going to push this stuff out, but it's given me an opportunity to create a proof of concept and figure out templates so I can then provide this for other businesses locally that would pay me to do it. And that's the trade-off. I'm helping a good guy. I mean, I really like this guy. We are becoming friends. We are going to be friends for a long time. I've met a lot of people now because of the Real Hernando podcast, but some people you just connect with. The gentleman that's helping me with my studio cameras and lighting, his name is Stephen Michael. He owns a business called Mississippi Music. Another guy. Buddy, I'm going to help him out too because he is helping me out big time setting up this studio. So, small town. This is what I love. We're helping everybody out. We're all helping each other out as young businesses trying to make our way up. So that happened today. It was awesome. First client. I'm going to call him a client, even though there isn't a business transaction at the moment. He is a client. I'm treating it like a client. If he was paying me $1,000 a month, what can I do for him? And it's awesome. It's exciting. All right. So let's do this new thing I'm calling the element. So I'm calling this the element because it's a sweeper. And we're going to be talking about radio and why this ties in with that and why I decided to add music in the middle as a way to bridge from my update segment to the featured topic. And why I'm also using this opportunity to talk about my sponsor, right? This episode is brought to you by Patreon. Go in the description. You'll see my Patreon link in there. Click it, and you will be taken to my page, which offers one tier. There's only one thing you can subscribe to, and it's called the Tip Jar. It's $1 a month, and that's it. It's simply throwing $1 in a tip bucket in front of a band. Same thing. But now you're doing it for me virtually through Patreon. And it's just a nice way, a nice gesture to thank me for this content I put out twice a week. And it's super supportive and helpful for me. And if I get a bunch of patrons, then hey, I might be able to invest some more money into this and we would all be better from it. So go to my link in the description, $1 tier. It's called the Tip Jar. And I would be so grateful if you signed up for that. And thank you. Oh, I wish I could say I timed it out that way. I wish I could say I was that good, but I'm not. Radio. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to, again, give you what I'm calling a get to know me. As we build this relationship, it's important that you know, like, and trust me. If you're listening to this, obviously now you know me, at least virtually. You don't know me like you would be a friend here in person, but you know me. You know my name is Derek. You know I'm a podcast producer and agency owner. Do you like me? Well, if you keep coming back, you must like me, I think, I hope. Or you're one of those people that really just loves, digesting content that you hate so you can be a troll. You could be that too. But hey, you keep coming back. So thanks for being here. But now it's all about trust too. So giving someone your personal life or being vulnerable can be a way to gain someone's trust. And that's supposed to be real and organic. But you read any book on sales and marketing, they teach you, be vulnerable, like force it out of you. so people can know, like, and trust you. So there's a scientific method to it too. So I'm doing it for all those reasons. But it's a story that ties in directly with podcasting because of my experience in radio. And it's a neat story, and it ended poorly, but it bridged me to two very beautiful things. So I'm going to try to make this fast too, y'all. Like, I can get long-winded on this podcast now that I enjoy it so much, but I'm going to try to give you a nice snapshot of what is, in reality. I would say this story spans from 1995 to 2018. So let's get started. It's 1995. I'm starting my senior year in high school. A total burnout. Barely. What I feel like is I'm failing. Like, even though I graduated with honors, it's a whole other story. But I was a burnout, and I wanted to go down the least path, or the path of least resistance, come senior year. Now, all I needed was English 4, which I barely passed, even though I still made honor roll for the whole 4 years. Just weird. But, well, it's because, I know why. It's because freshman and sophomore year, I wasn't smoking weed. That would be why. Anyways, I decided to take a course called media technology. And what makes the high school I went to cool, which was Sanford High School in Sanford, Maine, was they were the hub, and they provided vocational education. Automotive repair, small engines, woodworking, media technology, all kinds of different vocational type courses. And other neighboring towns would then come to my school to take these classes. So I chose media technology because it tied in with me being in music, right? There's soundboards, microphones. Now there's cameras too. I really didn't know what to expect, but I just knew I'd be able to probably turn knobs and push buttons. And it would be easy. And it was like half a day. And I was like, whatever, let's do it. So I jumped into that. And it was a fun class. The teacher, Bud Johnston, he was like, I felt he had to have been in his early 70s when I had him as a teacher. So there's no way he's alive. So God rest your soul there, Mr. Johnston. But it was very lax. You could basically just hang out all day. There wasn't any homework. There wasn't real assignments. It was basically play with the equipment, have fun. I was like, man, this is perfect. Well, one day in September, so it's early on, he comes to the class and just announces, hey, I have a connection with a radio station in Portland, Maine, which is 45 minutes north of where I live, and they're looking for a board operator. Is anyone interested in potentially having an interview? That's all he gives. I don't know what a board operator is. No one really does. Because again, he ain't teaching us anything. We're just hanging out. So me and my buddy Pat at the time raise our hands, but he beats me. His hand goes up first. And the teacher calls him, hey, Pat, you interested? And Pat asks the teacher, do I get to talk on the microphone? And Mr. Bud Johnston says, no. It's for an AM radio station, and all you're going to do is play commercials for a syndicated radio show. And he was like, nah, I'm good. And I'm like, where the fuck do I sign? Where do I sign? How do I get into this? So I didn't say the F word to the teacher, but I made it very clear. I'm in. He's like, awesome. We'll make the connection. And sure enough, I call the radio station off of his recommendation. They already knew I was coming to call. They're like, oh, hi, Derek. Yes, Mr. Johnson told us all about you. Would you like to come in for an interview? I was like, yeah. I get to work in a radio station? This other kid that poo-pooed it because he didn't get to talk on the radio. Like he's qualified to talk on the radio. I don't think so. I just saw it as an opportunity to earn money in a place with soundboards and buttons and faders and microphones and just, wow, how cool is this? So I was all about it. Went to the interview, met this gentleman by the name of Don Matson, who was the head program director of Oldies 100.9 WYNZ. And that's a whole other story there. But so anyways, it's Portland Radio Group is the name of the building. It's the name of the business, Portland Radio Group. And at the time, there was 4 radio stations, 2 FM and 2 AM. And how it works is every FM station has a sister AM station. Why? I don't know. But 93.1 WMGX, classics of yesterday and best of today. Am I right? And their sister AM was 560 WGAN, which was news talk. And then you had Oldies 100.9 WYNZ, and its sister AM station was 970 WZAN Hot Talk. And that's the station I was going to start working for. It was a closet with an old computer, old school radio board. If anyone out there is a radiophile, it had circular pots. That's all I'll say. Not pots like the drug, but faders that were round, and you'd turn clockwise or counterclockwise rather than up and down. Anyways, old equipment. It's an AM station, and it's nothing but syndicated shows. And that at the time was just really automated. So Tony Kornheiser, if you're a sports fan and know the show Pardon the Interruption, he used to have a radio show that was syndicated, and we carried that show. It was from, let's say, noon to 3 every day. No one had to be in the room. It was just automated. And any local commercials that we were playing for our market was automated through this machine that was playing the commercials. Oh God, I don't want to bury anyone in these weeds, but it was a radio station that needed minimal attention from a human, because that's how AM radio is. It would be the type of station that Howard Stern would be on, but the radio group was too cheap. They didn't want to buy Howard Stern in the morning, so they had this guy named Imus in the morning. All right, so I passed the interview. They hire me, and my job now is Monday through Friday from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. I get to sit down in this closet and listen to a show that's called Don and Mike, and it's a nationally syndicated radio show based out of Washington, D.C. The reason why they couldn't automate that show is because they were super cool hosts that broke the rules and never really did their commercial breaks in a certain template or a clock, as we call it. So they needed a human being to sit in every radio station that they syndicated to. They probably syndicated to 100 stations, meaning their radio show was fed to these other radio stations as a way to broaden their reach. Because a FM antenna can only go so far. So then you syndicate. So you feed your show to other radio stations across the country, and then those radio stations feed that local market. Well, then these local markets have commercials. That's how radio stations can afford to pay for these type of shows. So I had to sit in this closet, and every time the national show went to commercial break, I had to what's called dump the feed. So I turned them off and then play a commercial for a local Portland, Maine business and feed that to people's speakers. And that's all I did. And it was super fun. And I got to do this after school and leave school early because now I was eligible for co-op. So I would go to school, take my English class, one other class I can't remember, go to lunch, out of school by noon. I'm done for the day. And then I would drive to Portland and go do my job. And it was so cool. I couldn't believe it. I was in a radio station. Like, how did this happen? And I just always, to this day, I thank Pat for poo-pooing it. I thank Pat for being ignorant and thinking that it was not a good opportunity because he didn't get to talk in the microphone. So thank you, Pat, for being an asshole. Because he was kind of a bully too. So fuck him. All right, so let's fast forward here. I worked through my senior year. For whatever reason, I quit going into the summer of '96. And then I decided not to go to college. Who knows? All the drinking and smoking weed probably had a lot to do with those poor decisions. Then in the summer of '97, I decided it's time to do something. So I went to school. Went to a college called New England School of Communications in Bangor, Maine, and it was radio, TV, and sound engineering. I went there for sound engineering to work with bands. Worked in a radio recording studio. Blah 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 blah. Another story for another day. But it circles back to the summer in between my what was freshman and sophomore year, which really my only 2 years. I just got an associate. So that summer of '98, I'm home and I decide, well, I should call the radio station back and see if they have any work for me for 2-3 months before I go back to school, because I had a great relationship with them. And it was nothing to just pick up the phone and call Don, my buddy Don Matson, who hired me to begin with. And he was really sad to see me go. So I kept in touch, called him, told him what was up, looking for work. Is there anything? And he's like, absolutely. Come on, come up to Portland. Let's schedule a time. And I have something that I think that would be really good for you. I'm like, awesome. Sweet. So bam, I'm in his office. I'm sitting at his desk. I'm sitting across from him. After about 10 minutes of pleasantries and just catching up and bullshitting, I finally say, hey, so what you got? What are we doing? And he just looks at me. And then I see his eyes rise up and sort of like look over my right shoulder. He's looking to his left. It's over my right shoulder. And then he just points. Doesn't say a word. He just looks up and points to something that's behind me. So I turn around. And what do I see is a giant orange mascot called the Woolly Bully. This goofy, cross-eyed monster that's orange and called the Woolly Bully because there's a famous oldie song called the Woolly Bully, or just Woolly Bully. So I look back at Don. I'm like, what's that? He's like, that's your new job. He's like, that's what I got for you, being a mascot. I was like, really? Not what I expected. But you know what? I think it paid $10 an hour. He's like, yeah, we can get you a good 5 hours a week doing all these radio events and live appearances. And it's the summertime, so there's a lot of that going on. He's like, you'll get to be a part of these events at the local AA baseball field. And he just was telling me like what I'd get to do with it, how many hours I was going to get at $10 an hour. And I was like, you know what? Let's do it. This could be fun. Screw it. And it was a foot back in the door, and I get to hang out with my buddy because we were friends, man. I loved working for him. So that's what I did for the summer of '98 mascot. All right, go back to school. I come back. I graduate in '99. Sure enough, I call them back. Don's no longer there, I believe. By this time, he was gone. But I still had plenty of other connections. So, hey, I just graduated. I'm looking for work. Even though deep down in my heart, by this time, I mean, radio is what it is. Radio is just, you don't make a lot of money in radio. And there's no a lot of big future in radio. Unless you're a morning drive DJ that gets great ratings, you're really not going to make any money. So, but it was always a place for me to go that I knew I would have work. They always just invited me back. They'd find something for me, which was great. So I call them after I graduate and I start back in with entry-level stuff. I'm mascotting again. I am board operating as it's called, like I did for that Donna Mike show. Only different stations. Like Casey Kasem's an example where Casey Kasem would send the radio stations that he was syndicated to like 5 CDs, and each CD is an hour long of segments. And you would play the CD and you'd hear him talk about the top 40 list, and he'd play songs 40 through 30. And then you would then play commercials, and then you go back to the CD, and there'd be another segment where he does talk and radio, music and blah, 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 blah. But basically, it's the same thing. I'm sitting in a studio just playing commercials when I'm supposed to play commercials. No on air, nothing. But it's work. It's hours doing odd and end stuff, and learning all kinds of different things in radio. I've become the guy they trust. They're training me in all these different areas on how to read tower readings. To now I'm starting to do some very simple editing, audio editing for simple commercials, not like the big time commercials, but a little bit of editing, a little bit of stuff in the front office. I'm kind of just all over the place. They just keep like, hey, we get this other thing that would give you another 5 hours a week. But it's Saturday, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. You want it? Yes. So I was all over the place. My schedule was crazy and it was ridiculous. So that's what I start doing. And I'm working my way up and just building more hours. And I become friends and build a relationship with the the station program director for 560 WGAN. His name was Doug Tribou. And because I'm working a lot for him. He's the one that's hiring me for a lot of this board op stuff. So we build a relationship. We end up becoming drinking buddies, honestly. That's how that comes into play. And things are just going along. And by this time, I've also picked up a second job at a sandwich shop called D'Angelo's. And now I'm rolling two jobs at once and just working all over the place. And I finally get sick of radio again. And I'm very close to giving my notice, because then I got offered a job at this sandwich shop to go full-time and be an assistant manager. That was going to pay, I think it was like $26,000 a year, because there was mandatory overtime, like 10 hours a week, and it was decent pay, and it would have been pretty neat for me at the time. Well, it just so happened Doug's assistant station manager, program director is another term for it. His name was Matt. He was leaving. And Doug wanted me. And he knew that I was fixing to give my notice because I was going to start working full-time at the sandwich place. And he pulls me aside. He's like, have you been hired over there yet? I'm like, no. He's like, well, listen, my assistant is quitting. He's like, I want you to be my assistant. Like, you get the job. You're hired. What are they going to pay you over there? I'm like, well, $26,000 a year. Can you match that? Now, radio, to put it in perspective, the guy I replaced was making $14,000 a year in that position. That's radio, everybody. And that's poverty. So when I said 26,000, imagine what that was like, how that went with my boss, well, my inevitable boss. And he's like, well, whew, so I definitely can't get you that. That's probably what he was making at the time, right? And he's the manager, the head manager of a very large, popular news talk AM radio station locally. He's like, let me see what I can do. So he came back to me and he's like, man, the best I can do is 20,000. Now you think 20,000 sucks, because it does. But you know what? It was $6,000 more than the guy before me. So that says a lot. They stepped up, and yeah, that number sucks, but I know how it works. And that was big for them to add on another $6,000. And I knew that. And I saw the opportunity ahead of me to be an assistant program director for, at the time, was 3 a.m. stations. 560 WGAN, 970 WZAN, the very station I started at. Now I'm managing and technically the boss for all these other kids that are doing board op stuff. That's cool. And that by this time the group had acquired another radio station, WBAE AM, whatever. It was like Frank Sinatra, 24 hours, one of those stations. I'm like, awesome. I'm in. And what was funny is he hired me. It was a done deal, but he had to legally open the job up to the public and actually hold actual interviews and accept resumes. Could not announce that I was the new assistant program director until he had done so many interviews and read or looked at so many resumes. And he even had to post something in the kitchen, the big bulletin. The announcement was, everyone say thank you and say goodbye to Matt. He's done some good things for us. Please wish him well. We are looking for a new assistant program director, but in the interim, Derek Michaud is going to be stepping in and helping us out, blah, 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 blah. So I was announced as the intern and that they were opening it up for resumes. Hilarious. And I remember walking down the hallway and seeing Doug walk out of his office with interviewees thinking, man, that guy just wasted his time. And of course they hired me, and everyone in the building knew that it was my job. Everyone knew it was going to me, but legalities, stuff like that. But I realized we're at 30 minutes, so I'm trying to move this along. So I then eventually quit after a year and a half because I'm sick of radio, and it's one of those businesses where you just, it's so much work and it's so much stress and so much pressure for nothing. Like, you just don't make any money, and I just got burnt out and left again. And I don't know what different jobs I was working. Maybe was back at D'Angelo's. I don't know. But I remember, I was temping. I was a temporary employee for a Verizon cell phone store in Windham, Maine, where I was living at the time. I was a temp. And out of the blue, the production manager, his name is, what is his name? Steve Schneider, I think is his name. Yeah, I think that's his name. Anyways, he was the one in charge of making all the commercials for all the radio stations and dealing directly with the salespeople, otherwise known as account executives, because these account executives were writing the scripts for the businesses that they were selling commercials to. So that whole thing. But Steve Schneider was awesome. And by that, I'd known him for years now by this time. And as I'm skipping over things throughout all this time of me being in radio, I was slowly working my way up and producing commercials here and there and cutting tape. Back in the day, I actually used to cut tape before everything went digital. Well, he at this time, there was a budget for him to have an assistant commercial producer, or production manager is what it is, assistant production manager. But it was part-time. It was 20 hours a week. And the person that had that position was leaving. And he called me. And I remember picking up the phone. Like, he called, did he call my cell phone? He had to have. He didn't know to call me at Verizon. But I was at that Verizon store in the back room talking to him about this job and what it offered and the amount of hours and what I had to do. And I'm like, whoa, like, I get a real opportunity now to really push some buttons, turn some knobs, and slide some faders. Like, this is real deal. So I took it. It was $10 an hour, 20 hours a week. And that was it. That's all I got. And it was fun at first, but as usual, it gets stressful. But it taught me a lot about Pro Tools and working with DJs, putting them in the sound booth and recording them, reading scripts that I would eventually edit and add sound effects to. And it was awesome. I learned so much, which ties into podcasting. And I'll promise I'll get there as soon as possible. But as it goes in radio, sometimes you just quit and sometimes you get fired. But the common theme in radio is you do it and then you don't. And they said that my position was consolidated, but there was also maybe some burnout on my end where I might have not been the most productive guy either. by now it's 10 years of in and out in radio. And point being, the position ended. And it didn't end well. That's a whole other story. But feelings were hurt and drama was involved. But I said my goodbyes, and that's the last time I've ever worked in radio. So that was 2005. But what it did, in a whole other story, is that motivated me to finally make this big decision that was on my brain for a long time, and that was to move to Nashville to really boost my music career. Because all of this time, throughout all this radio experience and all these years, I was also a musician. And I lost my job in September, and on October 3rd, me and my buddy were driving to Nashville with a trailer behind my Durango, no place to live and no job ahead of us, and the rest is history. Another story for another day, for another episode. Now, finally, fast forward to 2018, and I'm looking for more supplemental work. I'm a musician. I'm an Uber driver. I'm a Lyft driver. I host trivia nights in local restaurants. It's a mosh posh of stuff to still barely pay my bills. So I found a website called Upwork.com, and I searched and Googled work from home. That's how I found Upwork.com. That's how ambitious I was. I was like, I'm only going to do a new job if I can work from home on my computer. Yes. Well, I found Upwork.com, and it's a perfect platform for just that thing. And I'm looking at jobs for like coding and data entry and more telemarketing stuff. And I'm applying to this shit like I cared and wanted to do it, but I was just doing it because if I can get another 10 hours a week working from home, let's do it. Then I discovered that people were posting and looking for audio editors for their podcast. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then I did a real search. I typed in podcast audio editor, enter. And that is the day my life changed. I can go back to that day, and that's when my life changed. Because then I saw the need for it and the fact that I could do it because of my radio experience. Not only did I learn about editing, but I also learned the art of transitioning an intro and outro, creating an intro and outro, how the music blends in, the transition from an intro into the body of an episode, creating commercials, how to blend a commercial into a radio show, how to manage content, because radio is so on a clock, literally. There's 3 breaks an hour. You got each break 3 minutes of commercials. So it's on a clock, and everything is scheduled. Radio is nonstop. Radio is nonstop. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to infinity and beyond. And you have to stay on top of scheduling and creating content on a scheduled basis with due dates and deadlines, and it's pressure. So I brought that into the podcast world to keep clients on pace. Like, okay, we're wanting to publish a new episode every Tuesday, then I'm here to make sure that happens. So I had that part of radio in me too. So I was able to pull from all my radio experience into this new world of podcasting. And all I really needed was Audacity to edit audio on. I know all the higher end editors listening to this right now are laughing at Audacity, but you know what? As a beginner, it's great. That's all I needed, and some internet, and build a profile, and try to get a gig, try to get a client. I knew I could do enough to be a podcast producer, editor. I had confidence in that. It was just a matter of pushing out proposals and trying to find a client, which finally happened in January of 2018. His name is Dave Turner. He's still a client to this day, and we still get on the phone and have our weekly meeting every week, 4.5 years later. My first client ended up being the nicest, coolest. He's like a mentor. He's great. And that's it. That's the story. 40 minutes to tell you that because of radio, I knew how to use Audacity to edit a podcast. But it really does tie in, because I don't think, well, so much of my life would be different if I didn't have any of that radio history. But I definitely wouldn't be in the podcast world right now. And my life would not be what it is now. Whether it's better or not, I don't know. I don't know what my life would have been without decisions made or whatnot. But I had one client in 2018, and now it is August of 2022, and I'm sitting in a studio that I'm building for my business. If that tells you anything, how much my life has changed because of the industry of podcasting. And all the way back to the day where I realized Upwork.com had just a feed full of people looking to hire editors for their podcast. Life changed. And here I am now, talking for too long on this podcast. And I hope you enjoyed the story. Trust me, there's a lot of stuff I didn't get into. This is probably like a 5-part series on radio. And I might do more radio topic episodes, because then I can pick apart the finer things that I had to experience in radio. But there you go. You got to know me a little better. I hope you now trust me more, right? If you're still a troll and you think this is crappy, well, if you're hearing me say this, then that means you're still listening. So I guess thank you. ShelbyRoweProductions.com. Patreon. Go to my description, click the link. $1 a month would make a big difference for me. I would appreciate that. Come follow me on Instagram at Shelby Rowe Productions LLC. Check out the YouTube channel. It's just my name, Derek Michaud. And I hope you all have a good day. And we'll talk to you again next time.